We will also manage mutes and unmutes through the call. The graphics used on the slides today can be made available to the media upon request after the presentation. And please note that if you have questions for specific local United Ways, we can refer you to those CEOs across the state. If you're in need of the press release or any contact information for United Way executives in the state, just let me know in the chat or by email, and I'll send that information over to you shortly. So without further delay, please welcome Laura Marks, President and CEO of United Way of North Carolina. Laura.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the press conference. Today, we're going to share with you important research, the 2020 North Carolina Self-Sufficiency Standard. This research will be foundational in how we approach local solutions for our communities, for those who struggle financially, and for those who've been impacted now by COVID-19. The Self-Sufficiency Standard defines the minimum income needed to realistically support a family without public or private assistance. The data is available county by county across North Carolina for more than 700 types of household configurations. That's a lot, I know. Self-sufficiency is a powerful term and something everyone strives for, starting as a teenager with our first jobs, and then as we build our family. The costs associated with having children fast becomes reality as parents are faced with childcare costs, medical expenses, and just daily living. So for today, we're highlighting those individuals and families who want to make ends meet, but do not necessarily have the income, enough income to do so. Last week, a single mom reached out to our 211 services through our website. She was asking for help now that her unemployment benefit had ended. She's a healthcare technician with an elementary school-age child. She spoke to the reality that her hours had been cut back to 2 days a week in March, and then her employer recently told her to either work full-time or be let go. Of course, she'd prefer to work full-time, but now her daughter's going to school from home and needs a structured environment to make homeschooling work. That mom is without support in North Carolina, so is facing an impossible choice that will jeopardize her ability to care for her family. These are the families who often feel overlooked. They earn more than the federal poverty level, but most likely just scrape by week to week with a bare bones budget. This worker is the anchor for the Self-Sufficiency Standard measure. So what does that budget look like? Let's take a look as it helps us to understand the Self-Sufficiency Standard. Next slide. This slide shows monthly costs that each of us have in our monthly budget: housing, food, transportation, healthcare, miscellaneous items, and taxes. The next column represents a single adult in Forsyth County who needs $20,000 annually to cover those basic expenses. This does not include optional items such as birthday gifts, savings for a rainy day, college fund, dining out, haircuts, or that unexpected flat tire. And it certainly does not cover the unexpected work interruptions that so many have experienced these past months. You will notice in the other columns to the right that the budget increases as the family grows. If that same person is married with 2 children, the basic bare bones budget is going from $20,000 as a single person to $57,000. That's a huge jump. $37,000 for a person who most likely has the same job before and after children. The Self-Sufficiency Standard provides a picture of financial needs and vulnerability, a sharper picture of financial needs and vulnerability than the federal poverty measure, which was created in 1964 based on food consumption in 1955. This slide illustrates the enormous gap between the federal poverty measure and income measured by the Standard for Self-Sufficiency. Back then, an economist used food consumption data to determine that families spent 1/3 of their income on food. As you will agree, quite a few things have changed since 1955 in terms of housing, healthcare, childcare, and transportation, and certainly as the number of women as head of household and who work outside the home has increased. Believe it or not, that exact same formula created in 1955 is still how the federal poverty level is determined today. It is, of course, adjusted for inflation and the differences in cost of food, only, but the federal poverty level does not take into consideration other costs and realities of our state 45 years later. So we turn to the Self-Sufficiency Standard as our benchmark of how families are faring. We have a large and diverse state, as you all know, and county to county, these basic needs are not the same in terms of cost. This map illustrates geographic variations in the cost of meeting basic needs across North Carolina for families with one child and one preschooler in 2020, one adult and one preschooler, sorry, in 2020. The standard for this family ranges from $30,000 in Person County to $54,000 in Wake County. Counties in the next category, if you're following the boxes below the map, the next category is $35,000 to $39,000, and these are located across the state and include Beaufort and Nash counties, for examples. These counties represent the median self-sufficiency wage for this family type in North Carolina. So if you looked at all 100 counties, the very median would be this grouping. The second highest grouping requires wages between $40,000 and $44,000, and the last and most expensive are those counties that require wages of $44,000 to $54,000. They are concentrated in the most popular areas of North Central region in North Carolina, as well as a few other pockets across the state. We talked earlier about how the federal poverty level only accounts for inflation and raising food costs. But if you take into account all costs, this map demonstrates the change in the self-sufficiency standard from 1996 to 2020 for one adult, one infant, one preschooler, and one school-aged child, a family of 4. Over the last 24 years, the standard for this 4-person family has increased on average across North Carolina by 101%. There's variation, of course, county by county, ranging from Rowan County with the smallest increase at 69% to Mecklenburg County with a whopping 161% increase. What does this mean in terms of dollars and cents? In Wake County in 1996, the cost of basic needs increased by 139%. So that same 4-person family needed $40,000 in 1996, and now they need over $95,000 to be self-sufficient. Today's report leverages 25 public data sources and provides the backstory of why the COVID-19 crisis is having such a devastating economic impact on families in our state. It also provides tools for understanding what the benchmark of income is for various family types throughout North Carolina. In partnership with RTI International, a nonprofit research and technical service organization, an online calculator was created that brings this standard to life. Our Money Needs Calculator provides a quick visual snapshot of what it takes to make ends meet, with amounts displayed monthly, annually, and as an hourly wage for over 700 family types. I strongly recommend that you check it out at our website, and I think you're going to be surprised by what you learn. Like our mom in that earlier example, many families are one emergency away from spiraling into financial crisis. For many, COVID-19 has become that one universal emergency. Job interruptions, income losses, neighbors pressed hard during these past months. These workers have faced fears of contracting COVID-19 without adequate healthcare coverage, paid sick leave, and with limited or no options to perform work duties virtually. Plus, childcare access and school closures have impacted critical services supporting children and forced parents to make very difficult decisions that are going to have a long-term, lasting economic impact on their family. United Way of North Carolina is honored to be a part of this work. We are eager to bring this data to our state, and it is our hope that this research will be a catalyst for others to understand what our communities are facing in the months and years ahead. We are committed to work together to meet those needs of those in crisis, to educate future workforces who are making their educational and vocational choices right now, at home probably, and to lean into the knowledge and experience that we have to create innovative solutions to address the gaps in earnings. So I just want to thank you for allowing us to share this important data today and the resources and experience of so many of you who will also follow me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. We appreciate your leadership and efforts toward this specific project and so many others. Now I'd like to introduce Annie Cooklick. She's a social worker and researcher with the Self-Sufficiency Standard at the Center for Women's Welfare at the University of Washington. In Annie's role, she oversees the report production and research on the foundational components of the Self-Sufficiency Standard. And she spent a lot of time working on the Self-Sufficiency Standard we're discussing today for the state of North Carolina. So welcome, Annie.
Thank you so much, and thank you to United Way of North Carolina for having me here today to speak a little bit more about the Self-Sufficiency Standard. I think that Laura did a comprehensive and really stellar job covering the research of the Self-Sufficiency Standard, especially as it relates to the experience of so many families in North Carolina right now. She touched on the definition, how it defines the basic needs budget, how costs have grown dramatically over the last 24 years, and how ultimately the standard illustrates the inadequacies of the federal poverty guidelines. To build on her discussion, I think the most important point regarding the Self-Sufficiency Standard and this report centers on how it relates to the needs of communities across North Carolina and across the country right now, as we enter nearly the 6th month of a global pandemic and its associated unprecedented economic effects for families. The Self-Sufficiency Standard highlights the growing gap between sluggish wages and ever-increasing expenses. Since 1996, the standard has used credible scholarly sources such as the Census, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to come up with an index of basic costs. We have data in over 41 states and work with partners who range from workforce development councils to government agencies to nonprofit organizations. The standard data is used for policy analysis. It's used as a financial counseling tool, a benchmark for wage setting, and a community indicator. Most recently, the city of Tucson is actually using the Self-Sufficiency Standard to set income eligibility guidelines for a COVID-19 relief grant program. So unlike the federal poverty guidelines or measure, the standard assumes that all adults work, rather than just one parent working and one parent staying home, which you can understand has implications for the costs of childcare for families. This standard is built on all of the costs of a family's basic needs, so that ranges from healthcare costs to childcare costs to housing costs to miscellaneous costs to taxes. It varies geographically to reflect the real change in living expenses in different places. And it varies by the age and number of children, which is particularly important with the expensive costs of childcare. As Laura mentioned, it's important to highlight that this measure really only captures the basic needs of families and does not account for things like a daily coffee or ice cream or credit card debt or haircuts, anything that a family might have that's in addition to their basic needs. So what does this tell us about what's happening right now? Looking to our past research with the Self-Sufficiency Standard data, it showed us that during the Great Recession, the cost of basic needs remained the same or even increased, while families concurrently experienced sunken or lost incomes. It also tells us right now that despite lost or inadequate wages due to the pandemic, families are having to make really tough choices trying to pay rent, buy food, arrange childcare, especially now with some children not returning to in-person classes this fall. For North Carolina, the Self-Sufficiency Standard report will serve as a baseline against which to assess the impact of the pandemic on the population when the economy and society begin to recover. However, even this baseline highlights some dire inequities. As you can see here, for example, North Carolina's minimum wage is equivalent to $7.25, which is the same as the federal minimum wage. This wage has not been updated since 2009. For a parent earning this minimum wage who has a preschooler and school-aged child living in Guilford County, this salary doesn't even meet half of their family's basic needs. Putting that in another way, including the value of tax credits, at the minimum wage, this parent would need to work 98 hours per week to meet the family's basic needs. For the same family type, let's look at Forsyth and Wake County. The self-sufficiency standard here is compared with the state's median earnings for the top 10 occupations in the state of North Carolina. Only one of these top 10 occupations, that of registered nurses in Forsyth County, cover the costs of basic needs for this family type. None of the top 10 median wages in North Carolina, which represent almost a fourth of the total workforce, cover the wages needed for a family of one adult, one preschooler, and one school-aged child to get by in Wake County. Changing the family type slightly to one adult and just one preschooler, this figure compares the self-sufficiency standard to the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation from 1996 to now 2020. We can see in this figure that the rate of inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, substantially underestimates the costs of rising basic needs. Instead of increasing 61%, as it says in the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, costs rose by 208% in Mecklenburg County since 1996, suggesting that for families struggling to make ends meet with low wages, the costs of basic needs are also rising faster than overall inflation measures indicate. This aggravates a real but hidden economic crunch for these families. Finally, and to wrap up, the standard tells us that families have a hard time meeting basic expenses, not because they lack responsibility or a desire to work or budgeting skills, but because jobs are not providing the income to cover the costs of basic needs. Ultimately, getting each person in our communities to self-sufficiency will involve the collaboration of many stakeholders, not just parents working or employers paying adequate wages and benefits, but also policies and programs that help these families reduce costs and raise resources. Thank you again for having me here, and I look forward to answering any questions that I can at the end.
Thank you, Annie. We appreciate you taking the time and speaking to us from the West Coast. Our next speakers will explain why this data matters and how it is being used as a foundation for work across the state. We first welcome David McNeil, the United Way of North Carolina Board Chair and the District Manager for Duke Energy Progress. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Jan, and good morning. It's an honor to serve as chairman of the board for the United Way of North Carolina and to be a part of the effort today to share the 2020 Self-Sufficiency Standard report with all of you. We often underestimate the real cost for families to meet their basic needs. The data in this report brings home the fact that many working families are living paycheck to paycheck, with no means to be prepared for a crisis such as COVID-19. Just since March 18th, more than 10,000 calls have been taken by the 211 specialists expressing a need for utility assistance. The information in this report raises our awareness and challenges us as neighbors and community investors to consider how we can take actions to address the economic challenges of working individuals and families. Supporting community champions with this valuable data resource is one step that the United Way of North Carolina can take to help bring about meaningful change. In addition to serving on the board for the United Way of North Carolina, I am a district manager for Duke Energy. When COVID-19 hit this spring, Duke Energy acted quickly to suspend disconnections due to non-payment, as well as waived late payment fees and waived fees for returned payments. Since then, we have encouraged customers who were understandably falling behind in their payments to pay what they could along the way to avoid large bill balances that may be difficult to manage later. The company will begin proactive customer outreach in September to offer customers in need the opportunity to establish payment plans to allow them time to catch up and bring their accounts current. Duke Energy encourages customers to take advantage of the company's payment plans to help manage electric bills and avoid service disconnection. In North Carolina, the company is providing extended payment plans for 12 months in length to avoid power interruptions. We recognize that the financial impacts from this pandemic have created hardships for many customers. Duke Energy is committed to working together with customers to find solutions for the financial challenges that they are facing during this difficult time. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Jan.
Thank you so much, David, for your leadership that you provide to the United Way of North Carolina and for the partnership with Duke Energy. Thank you also to the many other businesses across North Carolina who are also doing their part to support families and programs like the ones that David described. They were doing that before and since the COVID-19 pandemic, and we appreciate their service to the state. Thank you for reminding us that many companies are working with their employees and their customers to navigate through this crisis. Next, we have Michelle Gathers-Clark, President and CEO of United Way of Greater Greensboro. She will share how the Self-Sufficiency Standard is used in their work. Michelle?
Thank you. First, I really have to say that the Self-Sufficiency Standard is an excellent representation of the income gap that is really facing our nation, our state, and each one of our counties. Here at United Way of Greater Greensboro, and dare I say, across all of the United Ways in the state, we're going to use this information to inform our strategic planning process. Here in Greensboro, we are focused on the single issue of reducing the number of families who are living in generational poverty. We are inspired by the facts that are coming out in the Self-Sufficiency Standard, and we use it to communicate just that, the facts about what the Self-Sufficiency Standard is, how we can use it to reduce poverty, not only to benefit families in poverty, but also to inform businesses, governmental agencies, schools, and healthcare organizations in our community. Because at the end of the day, a family becoming self-sufficient is a benefit to all of us. We also use the information to actually build bridges with families who are in poverty, because we need to validate their concerns, because often you think you're crazy that you can't meet your own basic needs, and you're not. We also use it to build bridges with community members who just don't know the facts of a family that is living in the gap between poverty and self-sufficiency. So it is an excellent educational tool. We also use it as a tool to bring credibility to collective impact work for all the nonprofits in Greensboro that are working on issues that are outlined in the Self-Sufficiency Standard, as we saw. And families are authentically cost burdened. So let me give you an example. Imagine if we drill down to understand the cost of just childcare and rent. It is a game changer for someone who is low income versus someone who is wealthy. Another example of the benefit of this data is that United Way has been able to help a family of 5. Very specifically, we have a family in our community where the husband is a full-time student, receives an assistantship stipend, and the wife works at Walmart. Now we can all imagine that when that food bill and that childcare bill comes in and the housing costs, they cannot make ends meet. So here comes United Way. We were able to stand in the gap for this family. We were able to explain to them the holistic cost of maintaining a family of 5 and helping them with financial literacy, but also helping them to get their child care costs reduced by providing free child care. We also were able to help them during COVID-19 get access to the SNAP benefit that was available for food for the family. We were also able to do something that seems so simple, but to provide them with toiletries during COVID-19. So you see, this family, because of self-sufficiency standard, knows how much money it's going to take for them to be self-sufficient. They also know that there is help in the community, but most of all, they're self-motivated to get above that number and to achieve their full potential generationally for their family. So this tool has a number of uses, both strategically and practically, and we are truly grateful that the Self-Sufficiency Standard exists for the entire state of North Carolina. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We appreciate your service to the state and to your community and all the families you serve. And I have just a few first-person words from the family Michelle spoke about that I'll read it before we move to the next person. Just a short snippet. She says that after she had her third baby, she said, "My mother came to stay with us to help with the children. Even though I just had a baby, I took on as many work shifts as possible so that I could make enough money to sustain our family. Before, we were living in a single-room apartment. After the baby, our family would not fit anymore. We had to move, but we could not afford a 3-bedroom apartment. Now our rent is more than $800 a month. My husband has 2 years left before he finishes his studies. We are praying that everything goes well and he's able to finish then, but a lot depends on the weather. For entertainment, we take our children to the park. Once a year, we go to the zoo. We watch television the rest of the time. However, we also get books from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. I am proud of my 6-year-old son. He reads very well. Since COVID, the stimulus check and some free meals helped for our children, and so did the COVID EBT card designated for school-going children for $360 to shop for groceries. That money was helpful. Life is still difficult, but it's better now. 2017 and 2018 were hard on my family. We knew no one here. It was my husband, me, and the children, and God, because we believe in God. We are thankful to the people who have helped take us steps toward living a better life and building a better life for our children. We will continue working hard and doing our best to build a better future for them. And her name is Nessie, and she wanted to share that. She actually wanted to be here today, but guess what? She had to work at Walmart, and she was proud to have that job. So thank you, Michelle, for all the work that you do. And just down from you guys, just down the road in Salisbury, another United Way is using the standard in a creative manner. And I will now pass it over to Jenny Lee, Executive Director at Rowan County United Way.
Thank you, Jan. In 2018, our local school district, Rowan Salisbury Schools, unveiled the renewal school system, which is very unique to the state of North Carolina. This innovative approach works to redesign education for our district to create an authentic and personalized learning experience for all students through teacher-led flexibility. Some of the things that the students are able to focus are these specific 3 areas that are mastering the fundamentals of math, English, science, and social studies, strengthening their interpersonal skills, working with teachers to set goals based on their unique smartness, career ambitions, and personal passions. So there's an awful lot of flexibility when it comes to education here in Rowan County. With that level of opportunity, Rowan County United Way and Rowan Salisbury School District are working together and are having discussions on how the Self-Sufficiency Standard data aligns quite well to inform students about the needed income to support their long-term goals. This would be a wonderful partnership, as it would be beneficial to our community so that our young students and young adults who are entering the workforce have a clear understanding of their financial needs and can make vocational and educational choices that put them on a successful path. So our approach is a very proactive approach. And as a United Way, we find this real world approach to be vital to Rowan County and its citizens. We are so very fortunate that United Way of North Carolina has developed this research, and we are excited to cultivate opportunities to use this data to support our high school students and our community at large. Thank you, and thank you for your time today and allowing us to share about our work here in Rowan County.
Thank you, Jenny. We're really excited to see what happens in Rowan County and all the changes they're making there. We will now hear from Dr. Bernice Doder. She's Associate Professor, Department of Human Development and Family Science at East Carolina University in Greenville. Bernice, Dr. Doder.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I learned about the Self-Sufficiency Standard when my program area was looking for a practical tool to teach budgeting and family finances. We received a teaching grant in 2017-2018 to help strengthen students' critical thinking and career preparation skill for working with families, and also with communities around the concept of financial survival and budgeting. So what we did was we developed critical thinking simulations, and we were able to create different cases and also scenarios for our students. So in my class, I separate students into small groups of 4 or 5 with different family scenarios. Then the student will have to use the concept that we study in class to help families become self-sufficient. They use the Self-Sufficiency Standard to help figure out the budget for each of the families that they've been assigned to, what kind of job they will get to pay for the various needs. So students working on their own and together have to think critically using the Self-Sufficiency Standard and the other resources that are available on the United Way website to figure out concepts of family finances and budgeting. From my experience, I will highly recommend that other educators use these free resources to give students across our states a dose of reality and help them prepare for the future. When I introduce our money needs calculator to my students, many of them show it to their own parents. I also heard from students. For example, one of the students this past semester was considering having a child because all of her friends had children. But after seeing the real cost that is associated with having a child, she reconsidered. Another student decided upon evaluating the expenses and salaries offered that perhaps it was best to plan on living at home with her parents for a year or 2 so that she can get stronger in her own personal finances before entering the world. Other students have also told me that they use the Self-Sufficiency Standards and East Geographic specific data when they get a job offers. They compare the salaries offered to see if they will be able to afford living in a particular place. My students leave East Carolina University to teach in high schools and work in social agencies across North Carolina and also in other states. Many of them continue using this self-sufficiency tool to work with their students and with their clients to help families improve their financial situations across the lifespan. I always tell my students that they have to take baby steps and ask themselves, what is the next step to take to become self-sufficient? The self-sufficiency standard is a perfect tool to help them determine that next best step. So I am so thankful for this opportunity to be able to use the self-sufficiency standard in my classroom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doder, and thank you to all who have shared about how you are using the data to support families in crisis, those who are working toward financial stability, and students who have yet to enter the workforce. Our speakers today have spoken about the importance of community resources and of caring individuals. And next, we will hear from Heather Black, the 211 State Director, as we explore a research here in North Carolina that in detail reveals the impact of COVID-19 and reminds us that our most vulnerable families are facing a tough situation. Heather?
Thanks, Jan. So how do families that do not have the income to meet their basic needs survive? What choices must they make to pay for an unexpected expense? Often, this is when a family turns to health and human services resources in their community. However, what many find is that maneuvering through that network of services, finding the right agency with the right program can be really overwhelming. And that's where a call to 211 can be the right answer. NC 211 is a statewide information and referral system provided by the United Way of North Carolina with the support of United Ways all across the state. 211 is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to North Carolinians in all 100 counties. And a call to 211 is free, confidential, and available in nearly every language. On March 18th, NC 211 was activated by Governor Cooper as part of the state's response to COVID-19. Since that date, March 18th, the team at NC 211 has handled more than 97,000 calls related to the pandemic. Initially, those calls were directly related to the virus itself. What is it? How do people get it? What protections should I take for me and my family? But it didn't take long for the second tier of this disaster, the economic disaster, to surface, and many struggling families have been especially hit hard by this economic disaster. Callers now need help paying their rent, putting food on their table, paying their utility bills, filing for unemployment. I'd like to share with you the most recent NC 211 infographic on our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is a snapshot of our team's response as of July 31st. You're going to notice a few things here. First is the call volume itself. You'll see that there were 88,298 calls, and again, that was as of July 31st. And those calls represented 112,630 needs. That shows you that many of the people who called us had more than one need. The color-coded map shows you that there's actually a pretty equal scattering of need all across our state. People need help from the coast to the mountains in rural and urban communities. I also want to point out the incredible work of the NC 211 resource team. They have updated and verified more than 16,000 resources just during this COVID pandemic. This is really critical because many health and human service agencies have changed how they deliver service because of the pandemic. Another complication if you're navigating that universe of health and human services. So when we look at the breakdown of our top caller needs, you're going to see that the needs line up very closely to what we're talking about today with the launch of the Self-Sufficiency Standard. Our top 5 needs from callers during the COVID pandemic reflect the very basic of human necessities. People are struggling to pay for their housing, their rent, their mortgage. People are looking for just basic financial assistance as they face changes in their employment that has resulted in lost income. There was the federal economic income payment, and there have been CARES Act funds distributed through our communities, and those were very helpful, but they are not enough for the long term. Putting food on the table, keeping the lights on continues to be among the top 3 caller needs that we're hearing. And in many counties across our state, when you look at housing, childcare, and food, like we've talked about today, that accounts for more than 50% of a family's budget. When you have a reduction in your work hours or you're furloughed or you lose your job completely, many families who were already feeling a financial crunch are now in crisis. Many of our fellow North Carolinians are literally working hard to make ends meet. They live paycheck to paycheck, and they're literally one crisis away from not making it. And this time, that crisis is COVID-19. I think it's really fortunate that we have NC211 as a service to those individuals, but also as a real-time look at the needs of North Carolinians. We have forged strong partnerships with nonprofit organizations across the state and also local and state government leaders. And we're pushing our data up to them, and they're relying on that as they make informed decisions about how they're going to respond to this crisis. So we're very proud of that role as well in serving our fellow North Carolinians. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you and to the great 211 team who have just risen to a Herculean task during this unbelievable time. So I will now turn it over to Laura Marks, who will wrap up our reporting. Laura?
Great. Thank you, Jan. Thank you to all the participants today and all of our viewers. I hope you're getting a sense of how much we really do care about our communities, how we approach our United Way work has just really never been more important than it is today due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we're not done with just the self-sufficiency standard. To better understand what families are facing, we've also launched a COVID impact survey in July, which will close out at the end of August. This is a way to allow everyone to have a voice in speaking to the issues that have impacted their families. The survey responses will uplift COVID-19 impact of job loss and reduced hours, childcare challenges with children out of school, most pressing needs such as food insecurity, what households are most concerned about in the weeks and months ahead, technology changes, and many, many more things. We will analyze that survey data, and all of those needs that Heather described from 211 will be laid on top of the survey data. And then we're going to align it next to the self-sufficiency standard. Understanding what the priority needs is so very important, and we will identify them. We will also identify gaps and barriers to service, and we're going to uplift disparities in who receives assistance and who does not. All of this is really an effort to create a story of who and where help is needed, so that our local United Ways and other funders and service providers use data to drive decisions and to drive strategy. We can't just make decisions that aren't data-based. We must understand where the needs are, and we must allow people to have a voice in how those services will be provided back into their community. You can look for those findings beginning in late September. We'll be happy to share with everyone on the call today and that'll just be the first step. We'll also do additional analysis county by county in the months ahead. United Ways are committed to uncovering and removing obstacles while working in collaboration with community partners to ensure success in new and innovative ways. We must not do business as usual. We cannot do business as usual. We must be innovative, and we want to use the self-sufficiency standard as our foundation. We so appreciate the media's response today and all of you who've joined us. And we really hope that you'll honor us again by sharing what you've learned today in the hopes of really fostering action for positive change. So thanks again for being with us today, and I'm going to turn it back to Jan. Thank you.
Thanks again, Laura. Before we're going to get to questions, and they have been coming in, I'd like to offer just a few reminders that individual interviews with today's speakers and callers and with local, with today's speakers and local United Way leadership can be arranged. Just message me or email us and we will make sure that happens. And all the graphics that we've used today are also available upon request. If you have not downloaded the full report yet, most of the information is there, and just go to the United Way website and you can download the report, and I believe in a moment we'll put that link up on the screen. We also encourage you to share information. You know, the more people who see the report, who get this information in their hands, the better. And when you share it socially, please use the hashtag Self-Sufficiency Standard. All right, our first question is I think this one is for Annie. Annie, can you talk about the data regarding Mecklenburg County and how hard it is for them to live and what should be done to increase living incomes? Also, what impact has the pandemic had on people in Mecklenburg County, and how does that data support your answer? So,
You know what,
Annie?
Jan, if Annie could do the first piece, I can pick up on the needs piece, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. So looking specifically at Mecklenburg County, we can see one adult. I can just give you some numbers here if that's helpful. I can also share these eventually. We have the data available in the report and online. So one adult requires $12.92 per hour to meet their self-sufficiency costs. That is the equivalent to $2,274 a month and $27,289 a year. For a family with one adult, one preschooler, and one school-age child, that more than doubles. And the annual need is $64,124. So thinking about how that looking at sort of the guidelines and the other benchmarks of income compared to the minimum wage, that parent in that family type needs to work 168 hours per week in order to meet their basic needs. That is compared with the federal poverty guidelines of $21,330 per year. So it's almost triple what is being defined by the federal government as a poverty wage. So thinking about that as a comparison point, I think is a good place to start. And again, I'm happy to share the data. We talk a little bit more about how work supports can contribute to a family's ability to meet their basic needs. We talk about how minimum wage policy increases can also affect a family's ability to meet their needs. But I'll let Laura go into some more details on that.
What I wanted to share was that we do have a website. It's called 211counts.org. And at the website, it's a real-time dashboard up until yesterday, every day, that outlines every need that comes into the 211 call center by county, by legislative district, by zip code. So I just wanted to show that there is a resource out there, but I want to share a minute what Mecklenburg County says since the COVID response began on March 18th. So just for Mecklenburg County, we had over 8,000 requests for services. Sorry, it's more than that actually. It's 21,000 requests for services. And of those, housing requests are the number one. And within that, 75% of the requests around housing have been around rent assistance, with a great many of them people living in motels who were looking for long-term solutions to stable housing. Food, utilities, and healthcare itself were the next highest levels of requests for services. And those have continued to move up and down and increase every month in different ways. So initially, food was a big issue as schools closed and people were unable to secure, breakfast and lunch within the school system. But as those services have become available in a community, those food requests have gone down slightly, whereas utility requests have continued to climb steadily over the past 3 months. So I encourage everyone to view 211counts.org, look at your county, look at the trends and what's happened over the period of time to get a better understanding of how this economic crisis is really impacting the local community.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Annie. We've got another question. I believe this one will go for Annie. The question is regarding the self-sufficiency standard. We know that it's a bare bones budget, but how does credit card debt or debt in general to other creditors come into play with the self-sufficiency standard? Annie, if you could answer that one for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this goes back to our definition that we are truly a bare bones budget. So we don't incorporate concepts or realities that a lot of families face with credit card debt or other types of debt. We do have what we call the emergency savings fund that we incorporate in when we're calculating the data, and that looks at the average unemployment duration, the average unemployment benefit that a family receives, and calculates essentially what they have to save every month in order to cover their family in the case of an emergency. So while we don't look to credit card debt or health costs debt, there's a lot of these big financial burdens that families are facing that we don't include in our data because, again, we're looking at the bare bones budget. We do have some data on what families need to be saving per month in order to survive. And for example, if you're looking at that same one adult family in Mecklenburg County, they're needing to save an additional $203 per month in order to cover their basic needs for an extended period of time.
Perfect. Thank you so much. At that point, there are no more questions. Before we close out, I would just encourage you, if you have not, to download the report and also to go to Our Money Needs Calculator, which is a part of the United Way North Carolina website as well, and just play with that for your county or your surrounding counties, things that you're curious about. There's the web address where you can download the full report. And if you have specific questions or interview requests, you can message me or you can email Julia at that email address on the screen. So our goal from this press conference and the launch of the Self-Sufficiency Standard is to get this data in front of anyone who can use it. Policymakers, educators, other nonprofits, and other leaders across the state. Your presence here today means something. It's important. The possibilities of this report are mighty. Please take a minute and download the report and share on social media. Thank you so much for attending. And if you have any further questions, just let us know. And beyond that, we appreciate you spending your morning with us. So thank you so much. And we hope that you will just have a wonderful day. And if you need any more questions, let us know. We'll find you the answers. Thank you.